All right. Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to episode 21 of Complacency Kills, a Kontek Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about fencing and where it makes a difference for security personnel when they're deploying their strategy for perimeter security. So again, I'm Mike Witt. I'm our sales and marketing director here at Kontek. And today we have Pete Peterson.
Pete Peterson, National Sales Manager for Critical Infrastructure. Obviously, I do a lot of stuff in nuclear and DOE as well, but today we're here to talk about fencing and perimeter security.
Yeah, so you've had a lot of experience, I know, in your background working with fencing from a adversarial standpoint. So Can you give some background on to those listening, what your background is, particularly how, very specifically with fencing? And then from there, I think we can hop into some of the different stuff that you're looking for when you're trying to defeat a fence. What's important to you?
So my background specifically, I was a master breacher, spent, 14 years, special operations with the Marine Raiders. I got a lot of great training, a lot of good experience. More specifically, my last 5 years was highlighted, against high consequence facilities. We did a lot of breaching against those facilities and testing as well, research and development to make sure the high consequence facilities that we have across the United States that are guarding a variety of different things had the appropriate, perimeter protection. And we would use everything from, circular saws, crowbars, we would clip with bolt cutters, to explosive breaching, thermal breaching, even ballistics. And a lot of times, when we would attack some of these types of fences, we'd hit the posts if the panels were really strong, attack points there. Maybe we would try and bypass, or we would look for weaknesses, where the connection points are. A lot of times the material itself, unless it's just regular chain link, is pretty sound. It's pretty tough material, a lot of it. And so to be able to quickly defeat that and get to where we had to go, a lot of times we would pick a specific tool, pathway, or attack point to support that. So there's a variety of fencing out there that makes those types of attacks, or the types of attacks that we would want to use, significantly more difficult.
Yeah. And for, this is a common question. It's pretty, it's pretty common, especially for those that are new to the space and they're trying to figure out what their security plan is. What is the best fence height, or the hardest to defeat? Obviously, the higher you go, the more difficult, but at some point you have diminishing return on that. So just something basic that, for our listeners, because a lot of manufacturers will make stuff anywhere from 6 to 7 feet all the way beyond 12 feet, right? So
yeah.
So from an adversarial standpoint, is there a point where you're just like, I'm not going over this thing anymore?
Well, I mean, you're going to have different tactical opinions from different guys depending on their experience. I can say for me particularly, we go average man height. He's 5'10" in the United States. Maybe 6 foot or higher, right? So you want the fence to be taller than the human that's trying to climb over it. It also depends on what you're protecting specifically. A lot of times there's taller fences around switch yards and other things for several reasons. There's equipment that they don't necessarily want people to see, and they also want to make it very difficult for you to get up and over. And the threat is criminal more than it is adversarial. For other facilities, depending on what delay you have integrated, 8 to 10 feet, I would say, is the optimal height where it's difficult for someone to climb up and over. You can also put toppers on that, like barbed wire or other types of delay that make it more difficult for an individual when they get to that height to get up and over. When you start talking about material, installation, and all these things, a lot of that becomes difficult for sites, and then it's increased cost the taller you go. Really, the delay feature that you choose, whatever fencing material, should be relevant to the threat that you feel like you're facing and adequate to defend against that. So height can differentiate between what the actual threat is. But I would say 8 to 10 is probably I don't want to call it the industry standard, but probably, for the average person, me or you, if we were a criminal and wanted to get into somewhere, that would be difficult for us to climb up and over, depending on, what our level of physical ability was and our understanding of that fence and the material.
So, which is kind of a good segue into like the different levels of security fencing in terms of their capability, and then kind of what markets they lend themselves to. So, like for commercial facilities. So, a great example might be an Amazon warehouse, right, or a large corporate park and stuff like that. Typically, what kind of fencing solutions would you be recommending in an area like that where it's relatively low consequence, and they obviously need to have something to create? The two main things that you want to do, obviously, for the point of offense is, number one, a deterrent is obviously the number one component, and then obviously the second being a delay of some sort to to give you time to respond if there's some kind of incident. So
Absolutely.
So for commercial facilities, what kind of fencing would you typically recommend?
It really depends. Somebody like Amazon, they actually have material on the inside that if it was stolen, would cause the company some loss, right? So if you're protecting material assets in the commercial sector, really dependent on what it is. I would want more robust fencing for maybe a place that stores copper, right?
Sure.
Or copper wiring versus maybe a place that's just, stuff, right? Like cardboard boxes or cargo material or wood pallets or whatever. But the reality is, you mentioned it, and I didn't talk about it earlier, but fence height also, it makes it ominous. It makes it look, you're basically target hardening. When you put a taller fence up, it sometimes gives the appearance that, hey, this is a more difficult place to come into. We don't want people to come in here. But chain link, I think, would be sufficient for a lot of commercial facilities, but it really depends on what other integrated delay features and response capability do you have. Are you also watching that fence with a camera? So, hey, you can have a chain link that's relatively easy to, I can pull the ties at the bottom, lift it up 2 or 3 feet and scoot under. Or do I need something a little more robust, like, some industrial fencing that might have some ballistic or blast capabilities, or just be more difficult to cut, more difficult to pull away from the post, or just not able to. All of the material that you would be able to attack would be on the back side of that fence versus the front side, right? So I think for somewhere like Amazon, using that as an example in commercial facilities, you can get away with chain link. You might want to make it a little bit taller. You may even want to put some barbed wire on it, depending on what you're actually protecting. And then also, integrate camera systems or potentially other delay features like a guard force, intrusion detection. Again, it all goes back to what is that commercial facility protecting. For certain things, we can just do chain link, and that would support and also the area that you're in. The United States has a huge landscape of, what criminal activity is like. So if you're in an area where specifically it's much higher, you may want to invest in a fence height that's a little taller, delay features that are a little bit more robust. Outside of regular chain link.
Sure. And so, like, kind of going up the scale a little bit, like once you get to airports, I feel like the larger airports have fairly robust fencing systems, probably honestly not as high as they should be, because you still hear the reports of people scaling and running onto the tarmac and all that kind of stuff. But typically there, I feel like you see something more akin to like, the company we work with, Perimeter Security Solutions, their IFI-14 Palisade style fencing, which is ornamental. However, for anti-climb and anti-cut is still a very, very robust system and has those nice little spikes up top that, which I have seen, they definitely work. You catch a forearm or a leg on there. It's
definitely impeding movement and allowing response, So airports vary. I mean, they have, just like any other government organization, they have a set of guidelines that they're responsible for protecting, between FAA requirements and then just regular security requirements. They have a fencing requirement. What you'll see at a lot of airports is chain link, but sometimes you'll see in certain areas out by the hangar, storage areas, or where there's access to aircraft, you'll see taller fencing. You'll see fencing with barbed wire. You'll see fencing with toppers, like the Palisade you just discussed, or you'll see more robust fencing, like embassy fencing, the style that has slats that actually has, some steel in there that's difficult to cut. You're not sticking your whole body through there, and then it's got, it's bent out, so it makes it difficult to climb up and over. So there are, ways to get around that stuff. I mean, you can talk to petty criminals and former, fellas that used to break into places and do things like that, as well as, the military having to be able to get into facilities, both commercial and airports and other type of infrastructure like that. The reality is it really just depends on what you're protecting again. So I think for airports, you'll see a lot more of the embassy style fencing, a lot more robust fencing like the Palisades. There are probably certain facilities on the airport that have more robust, I wouldn't say ballistic fencing, but security enhanced fencing that allows them to create delay. And they usually have cameras, and they're integrated with an intrusion detection system. A lot of the doors that go in and out of the airport, a lot of the gates are triggered, balance magnetic switches, and a variety of other intrusion detection features that allow to the guard force to have a full picture of what's going on. So if there is an intrusion, they can detect it early and then respond, immediately. Obviously, we don't want people operating on a runway. So and you will see, like I said, taller fences. But then you go around to the back edge, where it's right off of a highway. It might just be simple chain link. Like you're going to visibly see someone come over the fence. So in high trafficked areas that there's a lot of visibility, they may not invest in the same infrastructure.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And kind of moving from there, I'm going to go up to what I'll call at least, towards the higher end of the spectrum. And I'll lump these two together because they have similar strategies. when it comes to fencing, and that's like high end or high level correctional facilities and nuclear facilities, and the fact that there's multiple layers of fencing with multiple layers of delay in between said layers of fencing, whether it be barbed wire bundles, C-wire bundles, spike strips,
cages,
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And obviously those are the highest consequence facilities that we'll really talk about today anyways, is obviously radioactive material, not a good thing you want leaving the facility.
Yeah.
And likewise, obviously on the correctional side, you know, we don't want, you know, killers and prisoners, you know, just walking out, walking out free. So,
absolutely.
So with that being said, can you kind of walk us through like what, you know, a traditional set of fence lines might look like when we get to that level of security?
Yeah, you know, you can create a significant amount of delay. I would argue that it has less to do with maybe delay time than it does with cost efficiency, right? When you talk about prison systems, they're not always as funded as we'd like to see them. So doing some defensive strategies or defensive protective strategies, and the whole purpose of a prison, you know, or excuse me, when we talk about defensive protective strategies, we're talking about, you know, like nuclear, airports. They're trying to keep people that they don't want, you know, on the outside, not on the inside. Right. Whereas a prison, the opposite, right? They want to keep folks on the inside. So they want to create enough delay that allows officers on the inside to both observe, surveil, and then respond if they need to interdict, you know, a prisoner trying to make movement or control where the prisoners can move. So with layered fencing, you get a lot of different, you know, enhancements. The fact that you have distance between each panels, you know, 2 to 3 to 4, just with 5-foot spaces between 8-foot fencing, you know, standard chain link, you can create a significant amount of delay in having to hop over all of them, you know, repeatedly. Obviously, if you put toppers or barbed wire on the inside of those channels, you can deter mobility. Rip wrap or rocks, you know, that slows folks down. You can do that as well. And depending on like a prison setting might be a little bit more, they're not as concerned about the folks, you know, getting injured, where commercial nuclear facilities, if American citizens are trying to, even though they might have criminal intent, we're still not trying to hurt them necessarily. We're trying to delay them so that an officer can assess and then decide on what the best response is. So two different, you know, ideologies on how to utilize fencing, but the same concept. When you layer it like that, it makes it harder to explosively breach. You've got to use more charges if you're trying to go in, and to get out, there's a lot more effort that would be needed, you know, to cut fencing, pull fencing. Sure. And prisoners traditionally may only have access to 1 or 2 layers out of the 3 or 4. A lot of times you go past these correctional facilities, you'll see they're layered, the fences are super high. It's a deterrent as well as visual to the prisoner. Oh my, I can't climb 12 feet. I can't climb 20
some of
feet.
these, I've seen some of these prisons, it looks like a Topgolf facility, man. Like those things are, they're riding high. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, there's obviously some other areas that kind of fall in the middle, right? So like when we get into the areas of like petrochemical and stuff like that, usually those are, you know, what we classify as medium risk when it comes to the type of, you know, the robustness that they need out of their fence lines. I think but that's all increasing. Same thing like we've seen in the news, obviously with substations. I think that's obviously coming to an front now where there'll be a lot more investment when it comes to security fencing and delay features at substations. But again, you know, here at Kontek, we got great fencing experts when it comes to performance, when it comes to making recommendations. We have a variety of fence types that we work with. We work with Perimeter Security Solutions that does a great job, especially on their IFI-6 and IFI-9 wire mesh. But if you guys need anything, please reach out to us at info@kontekindustries.com and continue to look out for more content throughout the month for more info on fencing. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.